RX Television on RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as #AskDave on RxMuscle.com, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your weekly 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB pros, competitions, life in general, whatever it is on your mind, Dave is here to answer your question. If you want to join us, you can join us on Instagram, our social media platform, and Muscle Central Forum on RxMuscle.com as we now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, yesterday's big news, Kelly Ryan released on parole. You had your video, got pretty good traction on it, and now the fans want an interview. Is that possible?
I don't know if an interview with her is going to be possible. I actually reached out to the victim, Melissa James' mom, Maura James, and I asked her if she'd like to do an interview because I'd like to get her, impressions on the release of Kelly Ryan and everything that's gone on over the last 13 years since the crime was committed. I don't know where Kelly is. I wouldn't even know how to get in touch with her. At some point, if she, if her life, gets to a point where it's, I guess, quiet or peaceful enough and she wants to come talk about it, I would love to interview her. I mean, I pretty much, roll out the red carpet just to see, what was going on in her mind and what she wants to talk about. I mean, she's done her time. I'd love to know what happened that night. I'd love to get her perspective on it. I don't think anyone's ever really heard it. I think it would be a great interview. I know a lot of people think that, she's the murderer and she's this terrible person, and she might be, but she did her time, what she was convicted for, and at this point, if you got to forgive, I guess. I mean, that's the only thing you can do. You can't live with the hatred harboring. Although I'm sure the family of Melissa James will never forgive her. That's something that they have to deal with. But it is an interesting chapter because OJ was released like a month ago, and Craig trained OJ, and then Craig's wife Kelly is released like a couple, maybe a week or so later. It's kind of ironic in a sense, and obviously Craig will be there for quite a while, probably the rest of his life, unless he makes it till his late 80s, and he might get out by then. I think he's got to do something like 50 years or something like that. I think he got 18 to 36 years or something like that, something crazy like that. So who knows? I think after 36 years, he's probably served his debt to society at that point, but who am I to judge? All I can do is report on what happened, and that's what happened. So Kelly's out, and what she does with her life now, it's anyone's guess.
That interview, well, not interview, rather, that news story right now on RxMuscle.com as well. Dave speaking to Lou Ferrigno, the Incredible Hulk himself, Ferrigno Legacy Classic, coming up in November. That interview is going to be available tomorrow on RxMuscle.com and the YouTube channel. Let's go to our questions. First, we go to M. Matari. Dave, thoughts on glucose partitioning supplements that have been coming out recently?
I'm not really sold on a lot of these glucose sensitizers. They're supposed to sensitize the insulin receptors to make them more receptive to insulin. So if, let's say, you eat 30 grams of carbs and the carbs turn into glucose, the glucose goes into your bloodstream, your body releases insulin. The insulin receptors, which enable the insulin to work and push the carbs into the cells, obviously are very important. If there's not a lot of sensitivity, meaning the receptor levels are down, they're not responding well, the body doesn't know what's going on, it can't absorb glucose, the body has to try to produce more insulin. Excess insulin obviously can lead to fat storage. If your body can't produce the extra insulin, a lot of times you get high blood sugars you can run. So both of those scenarios are not good. Probably the best insulin sensitizers, believe it or not, are your fish oils. That's why people always say when you eat fish, you lose weight more easily during a contest diet. That's because the fish makes you more insulin sensitive. So you're releasing less insulin. Less insulin means less fat storage, more fat mobilization. So my best suggestion would be to take a product like my Omega-Lyse formula, because Omega-Lyse not only has your 3 grams of fish oil, not only has your omega-6 essential fats, the GLAs, but it also has palmitoleic acid, which is a very powerful known insulin sensitizer. It's an omega-7 fat. It's not necessarily essential, but it's terrific at sensitizing insulin receptors and keeping total body inflammation low. So you take a product like that, 3 pills twice a day, you're going to get way more insulin sensitivity than taking all these other cinnamon bark and all these other crazy ones that are out there. Not to say that they're bad, but I haven't seen terrific results. I know people who have borderline type 2 diabetics. They take all these different insulin sensitizers, and nothing seems to work like fish oil does.
Kenneth Torres, Dave, your thoughts on avocado oil as a replacement to extra virgin olive?
First of all, I'm drinking my amino lyes here, or I should say amino evolved, excuse me. I wanted to call it amino lyes, but it was the name. There was a name that was too close to it, so I called it amino evolved. Anyway, getting back to the avocado oil, I think it's a great oil. It's a good monounsaturated fat. It doesn't taste that good. That's my problem with it. It doesn't. You know how like avocados taste really good? It doesn't taste like avocados because all the good tasting part of the avocado has been removed. It's just the pure oil. So to me, I wouldn't use it. I think the best monounsaturated fat is your extra virgin olive oil, which as we know, most of the extra virgin olive oil on our market in the United States is fake. It's soybean oil. So I don't trust that anymore. Plus olive oil, you really can't cook with it. So that's why I'm a big advocate of macadamia nut oil. It's one of the reasons why I spent a lot of money and time and effort trying to sourcing the thing so that I can import it to this country, because we don't grow macadamia nuts here in this country. They grow it in Australia, they grow it in Hawaii, and they grow it in South Africa. Hawaii has terrible soil, so you don't want to use macadamia nut oil from there. It doesn't taste that good. And Australia has growth seasons, so certain times of the year you got the oil from there, sometimes you don't. South Africa has no growth seasons. You have it all year round. That's why very rarely, unless my stock runs out and I have to reorder it, like happened this summer, very rarely do I run out of macadamia nut oil. So to me, if you're going to use a monounsaturated fat that you want for cooking purposes, that you can cook with, I should say, and it tastes good, macadamia nut oil has the best of all worlds.
The Atomic Beast, David, what age do you see, or did you see, the most bodybuilders hitting muscle maturity? I'm 23 years old, natural, and I've got multiple compliments the past couple of years from people coming up to me telling me I look great. But to me, I look like I have the muscle softness of a 16-year-old. When does muscle start to harden?
Muscle maturity is more about, when a muscle grows, it gets long first. When it can't go any longer, okay, it starts to convolute and round off and then convolute on itself. So, that takes time. Everyone's a little different, but you know what? In life, to be a master at anything that you do, it usually takes about 10 years. And that seems to be the case with muscle maturity too. When I was 24, 23, around there, I had a lot of muscle in my body. But when I was 33, I had a lot of muscle maturity, and it looked denser and harder. And a lot of the black and white pictures that you've seen online of me, Per Bernal took in 2002 and 3, those were, I wasn't the biggest I was. I had a lot of injuries then. That was the end of my career, but I looked the best because the muscle had a grainy, dense, convoluted look on it that I didn't have when I was bigger and maybe had better symmetry when I was younger. So once again, you got to be patient. Bodybuilding is a long-term project. It's not something that you do for 2 years and all of a sudden you're Mr. Olympia. It doesn't happen like that. Very infrequently does it happen like that. Even Mr. Olympias that look, or guys that have tremendous genetics who come out. Look at Big Ramy. Big Ramy's only been training like 4 or 5 years, and he just doesn't have that muscle maturity yet either, although he's got an enormous amount of muscle. Wait till you see what he looks like in 5 years. It'll be like a different person.
The golden physique. Dave, your thoughts on the quote-unquote golden era cycles without any testosterone?
Say that again, one more time.
Your thoughts on the quote-unquote golden era cycles without any testosterone?
I think if you want to put on dense mass, you got to use testosterone. The first cycles that I did were, Primavone, Winstrol, Anavar. These are because I didn't want to, suppress my natural production. I was one of these guys that studied everything about steroids in Bill Phillips' books, and I just didn't want to, risk shutting myself down and breaking out from acne and all the side effects associated with testosterone. So I never did it, and I got harder looking, and I got veinier looking, and people in the gym thought I looked good, but I was like, I don't have the density of these bodybuilders on stage. I'm going to get killed. So when I started using testosterone, that's when my body started to change, and I started getting dense muscle. I started getting thicker from the side, not just width-wise, and I really saw a lot of changes in my body. And I don't believe that you can put on thickness and mass on these very anabolic compounds. I think you need to add testosterone. So it depends what your goal is. To get back to the question, if your goal is to get big and dense, you got to use testosterone. If your goal is to put on 5 pounds of muscle and just look a little leaner and more vascular, then yeah, stick with the anabolics. It's fine.
Let's go to Jose LOP12. Dave, your thoughts on how to approach the post-show rebound? Do you go right back into training hard, or do you take some days off to recover and you gradually increase calories, or go straight into a bulk?
You know, when I competed, I would go pretty much ballistic, eating everything in sight, but I kind of like, not crazy, but I would eat a lot of food, pretty much all the foods I didn't want. I mean, that I wasn't able to eat during my diet. I would go back to the gym on a Monday if I had a Saturday show, and what I would do is I would do one body part. I would do like chest. I would do like 5 or 6 sets, and I would leave, just because I felt good, and it felt good to go to the gym and pump some blood into the muscle, get my circulation going again, because you're always retaining a lot of fluid after a show. So for me, it was like therapeutic. I just wasn't trying to set any records. Probably by about 3 weeks after my show, that's when I started to get back into my old routine again. But the first couple workouts back for each body part were kind of just have fun, get some blood in the muscle. You look insane because you're so carved up and you're so bloated up that the muscles just look enormous. You're getting crazy pumps. Enjoy it. Don't try to go there and set records, because you'll probably wind up getting hurt. I remember Craig Titus. Speaking of Craig Titus, he I think it was a week after the USA when he had lost to Phil Hernan. He was in Gold's gym and they were all benching, and he went in there and he tried to bench 500 pounds, and he was able to bench. He was a 500-pound bencher, but you don't try to do that the day after a show. And he popped his pec muscle. Not the whole thing, but he tore a good piece of it, enough that he needed surgery with it. And actually, the surgery they did was tremendous. He got really lucky. He wasn't really out of the gym that long, but you got to be careful. You're vulnerable right after a show.
Yogesh Belhara, Dave, your thoughts on taking 200,000 IU vitamin D injection once a month instead of daily 7,000 IU?
It just sounds extreme to me. I don't know. That's not how our bodies, really produce, vitamin D once a month. I mean, I don't have a problem taking a pill every day. I take 7,000 units of vitamin D every single day. I feel great. My vitamin D levels are normal. I mean, I've never tried to take that amount once a month by injection. It just doesn't seem like your body's going to process that much of it properly. So to me, in the old caveman era, when we were outside, walking around with almost no clothes on in the sunlight every single day, that's how we got vitamin D. Sun exposure, the UV light, causes the skin cells to produce vitamin D. Because we're inside all day long, we don't get exposed to the light like we used to. We have to mimic that. And why would we mimic it once a month? Because you would normally get daylight every day. So I think a better dosing of it would be daily. That's how I rationalize it. Whether I'm right or not is unknown at this point, but I know what I do works.
El Turk, what drug to cut out leading up to a show due to water retention?
I don't worry about water retention leading up to a show, because that's what diuretics are for, and that's what water restriction the day before is for. So to me, if a drug is really making you hold a little bit of water, who cares? I'll get rid of it with my depletion and carving up procedures. Very rarely does anyone hold water that is unable to be gotten rid of, unless there's something seriously wrong, like an infection in the body, or some kind of trauma to the body was done and it's excessively inflamed. But generalized water fluid retention just from taking testosterone is not going to blur your definition on stage if you dehydrate and you take the right diuretics. So I don't worry about those things.
So Roosh SRD, Dave, if you're taking T3 on a keto diet, would you still need to have a cheat meal since your metabolism is full?
If you're taking T3, would you still need to get a cheat meal? I think that was what the question was. Yeah. And I would say yes. Because When you take Cytomel or T3 to augment your thyroid, production in your body and to burn fat, at a faster rate, you're not shutting down your natural production completely. So there's still some T4 being produced, which is then getting converted to T3 in the circulation. And because of that, you still want to have you still want to spike your insulin levels once a week so that your metabolism doesn't naturally shut down. Think about it. If your T4 to T3 conversion completely shuts down, you're taking some thyroid supplementation in the form of T3, but you're not taking enough to cover what your body naturally produces. Now you're still low. So that's not a good thing. So we want to make sure that your body's converting T4 to T3 at the optimal levels. Once again, you don't have to eat everything in sight as a cheat meal. I've lowered people's cheat meals to 35 grams of carbs for 2 meals a day. I mean, from clean rice, it's as easy as that. That meal alone, those 2 meals alone will spike insulin and will keep T4 to T3 converting. Early on in the diet, it's nice to have a cheat meal because it gives you something to look forward to, and your body seems to be able to compensate and burn that thing off, especially if you're only doing it once a week and you're not going too crazy. So for me, I like to keep it in. I usually pull it out the last couple of weeks if necessary. And some people, it's not necessary. And some people, I have to give them more than 1 cheat meal a week because their metabolism is so fast and they're in shape already. So it's a person-by-person type of situation.
Kyler Gentry, Dave, how long before your show would you cut out all your injectables and orals out? Would you suggest taking a shot the week of your show?
I never take them out. I might take testosterone out the Wednesday before a Saturday morning show. Everything else I keep in. So I don't, look, I've said this before. If you look really good at a week out, why would you stop or change anything? You're only looking to screw things up. If most of the people that I work with at 1 week out, I'm so happy with the way they look. I'm like, man, I got to do very little things. I don't want to change anything because they look so good. I don't want to screw anything up. And a lot of times, people get nervous when you don't change things. So what I have to do is I make them send me updates once or twice a day that last week, just so I can say, oh, everything's good. Don't change anything. Stick to the plan, because I don't want to screw anything up. Once again, making drastic changes that last week will more than likely screw things up rather than make them better.
Dave, we're getting a lot of questions, so I'll just kind of group it all together about Lee Priest. Lee Priest was in the hospital, I believe, last week. Do you have an update? Have you spoken?
I have not, actually. I reached out to him yesterday, actually, asking him how he was feeling, because I know he said when he was feeling better, he was going to come on the show and tell us everything that happened, because, people make up crazy stories and stuff like that. I did not hear back from him, which is unusual, but after the show's over today, I'm going to give him I'm going to call him up, actually, and see how he's doing, because him and I kind of have a little friendship going now, so I want to, make sure that he's feeling good and that everything's all right, because you never know. Sometimes people take a turn for the worse. So, Lee very rarely gets sick, and for him, this is unusual. So I want to give him a call, and we'll find out. We'll give you guys a report and an update, especially if he's feeling better tomorrow. We'll get him on the show, and we'll get a little interview with him.
Watching Ask Dave on RxMuscle.com, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Again, Amino Evolve, available at SpeciesNutrition.com. Get 25% off using the promo code AMINO25. Let's go back to the question. Jules, 5.0 bodybuilding. Dave, was there ever an official autopsy released to how Dallas McCarver passed away, or is that still up in the air?
I have not heard anything, official on the record, so I don't think it's appropriate for me to speculate on what I heard off the record. So, it sucks that we don't know what happened, but obviously, let's look at it from this perspective. Most young people who pass away, okay, it's usually from accidents, okay? Now, I don't believe he choked on anything. I don't really believe that's the reason, but he could have had something, else go wrong. Sometimes an aneurysm, a heart attack because there's like a temporary blockage in your heart. You don't know. These are little things that can happen, and sometimes families don't want to release what really happened because there's no reason to. I know a couple of people that I was friends with who committed suicide, and their families didn't want anyone to know. They said they didn't feel it was no one's business, and I agreed. So how Dallas passed away, what the official cause of death was, I don't know. But the bottom line is that we lost a really good soul, and that's really what we have to remember. And it doesn't really matter what killed him at this point. but we should just remember him for who he was and what he contributed to the bodybuilding world. And, you know, as long as, you know, his memory is with us, then, you know, hopefully, you know, he won't be forgotten. Unfortunately, our bodybuilding world has a very short memory. I'm sure in 5 years from now, I'll be interviewing someone and I'll be like, what did you think about Dallas McCarver? And they'll be like, who's that? You know, so it is the way of the world. You know, we only know what's relevant right this minute in front of us.
Howard 9, Dave. So I've had my back x-rayed and my back is fine. Although for the last couple of years, I've had lower right back problems. It comes and goes, and the feeling of maybe a pink nerve or muscle spasm, as the doctor said. It almost feels like a string in the area that gets stabbed when I bend over and reach for something. Then becomes very sore and I have to be very careful for a while until it somewhat heals. Any ideas for?
You know, my wife Amanda is like really big into chiropractic, and she, you know, she always reminds every time I have a little neck pain or back pain or something like that, or people call me and they have headaches or they can't sleep. She always reminds, and I always forget. Ask them when the last time they got adjusted was. And I always tell that to people now, you know, whenever I get these weird pains that don't go away and they're kind of like spinal related, I always say, you know what, go get a chiropractic adjustment. Because I'm the most negligent person. I know that chiropractic works. When I was in New York, my friend Derlin Castro, I would go to his house, you know, he would adjust me, do ART on me, and I always felt a million times better. And nowadays, I try to go to the chiropractor once a week, and I'm telling you, I feel so much better. All the little kinks and pains and, you know, aches that I get from sitting all day at a computer desk, it really helps a lot. So, you know, it sounds like it could be something that needs an adjustment or possibly some ART work on it, active release techniques, could be some scar tissue or adhesions in the muscle there. But invariably, those adhesions or scar tissue could be trapping a nerve. So go to the chiropractor, get some x-rays done, and let them adjust you, and usually that'll solve the problem.
You know, we get a lot of questions, Dave, about blood work numbers. This one specific to, well, the question from David Golson. He wants to know if there's any blood work numbers that go hand in hand with back acne.
With what?
With back acne.
Well, I mean, if you have high DHT levels, dihydrotestosterone, that's the precipitating hormone that will increase acne breakouts for sure. So if you're taking like, you know, 1,500 milligrams of testosterone a week and your DHT levels are super high, that will certainly make you more prone to acne. Now, a lot of people who have come to me with this problem, I've put them on my Testalize product from Species Nutrition, 3 pills twice a day. And that seems to, you know, it doesn't get rid of the DHT levels, but it lowers them significantly. And that helps a lot of people's acne, both men and women I've used this with. And I can't tell you how many people have thanked me because it's a very natural, easy solution as opposed to having to go on a DHT blocker like finasteride or dutasteride. Those things have side effects. So try the Testalize at 3 pills twice a day. Also, go out and buy Dial soap, the original Dial soap, the white one or the yellow one. And make sure you wash your back with it and you wash your whole body with it. It's very antibacterial. It keeps the oils down. And remember, it's that oil and the dirt that feeds these bacteria in your skin cells and in your pores. And that's what will cause breakouts. You know, when we go to the gym, we sweat a lot. Even though the sweat goes into your sweatshirt or your t-shirt and it kind of dries up, it's laying on your skin now, and that's a breeding ground for bacteria. So try Dial soap. If you can't reach your back and you have no one to wash your back for you, get one of those, you know, long back washes that have like a loofah pad on it, and I use it every day. I do my back, and it really helps because I was very prone to breaking out when I competed, and probably to this day still am. Obviously, I'm not on any hormones now, so it's a lot less. But I always wash with Dial soap, and that really helps.
Kristen Misfit, Dave, I stay in good shape throughout the year. I don't get heavy off season. I compete in the bikini division. My last prep, I started 22 weeks out and it was 2 months. I had my heart set on 3 shows this year and only did 1. Is it okay to start 12 weeks out instead?
For most women, I start about 16 weeks out, unless they're really, really lean. If they're really lean, I could do, you know, 10 or 12 weeks. But, you know, for most women who have, you know, some body fat, I like to start slow. This way I can kind of ease them into the diet. And I work with a lot of bikini competitors. And usually the women I work with like to work with me longer because we can experiment early on in the diet, see how their bodies respond to certain foods and everything like that. And I try to feed people as much as possible in the early stages of the diet so that, you know, if they can lose the weight eating more food, it's obviously, it's better for us so that I don't have to cut things too early. What might have happened to the person who's asking the question is they might have been on too severe of a diet for too long. And once again, what happens a lot of times when you do that is your metabolism shuts down. I've worked with people where their metabolism shut down and I had to actually feed them more. Even close to a show I had to do this just to kind of get their metabolism going again, and then I cut the food back again, and then when they started losing weight. So a good coach is able to make these accommodations and switches, but it's always harder when you have less time to work with someone. So I prefer 16 weeks, but I've had people come to me all the time, hey Dave, can you do the last 4 weeks of my diet? Can you do the last 6 weeks of my diet? Can you do the last 2 weeks of my diet? And yeah, given what I have to work with, I use the tools at my disposal that I have to use. So, but once again, if you're starting a diet and you're planning ahead of time, I would always choose 16 weeks if I had the option.
You're watching Ask Dave on RxMuscle.com. Reminder, tomorrow, our Dave's interview with Lou Ferrigno, dropping on RxMuscle.com and the YouTube channel, the Ferrigno Legacy Classic, coming up in mid-November. Let's go to Rick. For Dave, I use all your products. I love Isolyze. I always use 2 scoops post-workout. However, is it beneficial to use 2 scoops during the day when I use it, or is it better to use the 1 scoop? Can the body digest that much protein at once?
You know, I've been asked this question a lot, how much protein can a body assimilate at one time? And it really depends on how big the person is, how much muscle mass you have. Think about it. Someone with 250 pounds of muscle mass requires a lot more protein to repair that muscle that's being damaged in the gym than, say, someone who has 100 pounds of muscle in their body. So to say that everyone only needs 30 grams of protein per meal is silly. Because if you're, like I said, when I was 300 pounds, I can assimilate probably 50 or 60 grams of protein per meal because I needed it. If your body doesn't use the protein you're eating, that's when your body now has to turn it into other things, whether it turns it into energy, or turns it into carbs, which then gets stored as fat, which is a very inefficient process, but it can happen. These are all possibilities. Most of the time, if there's too much protein there, the body will just use it for fuel immediately, usually by converting it into some kind of glucose at some point in time. So, if I'm working with a bikini competitor who weighs 115 pounds and I give her 50 grams of protein per meal, it's going to be wasted. If I'm working with a 235-pound, male bodybuilder and I give him 50 grams of protein per meal, he's going to use all of it. So it really, once again, depends on how big you are, muscularly speaking.
Take a couple more questions. Let's go to Jeff Car Fitness. Dave, are bad joints inevitable in a bodybuilder? I'm 24 now and already have lumbar issues, shoulder pain, and sometimes knee issues. I've never gone super heavy and always trained smart. Is this just a part of the sport? I don't want to be crippled when I'm older. My rotator cuff's already hurt. I take Arthrolyze. What else can you suggest?
Well, it sounds like you're already going to be crippled when you're older, so you might as well just keep going at this point. You already got the injuries. Look, some people are prone to injury, some are not. I had really very few injuries in my career. I had this, the pulled this, the pulled that, but my shoulder joints were always the thing that was like that nagging behind the scenes type of thing that was going on. And I knew they were going to get worse and worse as I got older. And so, I mean, in reality, that was really it. My quad that's torn now was from a freak accident I did in 2012. It had nothing to do with bodybuilding. So by and far, I really didn't have any injuries. I just had these 2 terrible shoulder joints that need to be replaced. That probably was genetic in me, and I'm sure the lifting of heavy weights probably made it happen quicker. I know people that have no injuries whatsoever. I don't even know how they do it. Ask Dexter Jackson. He probably gets 40 massages a week, but he doesn't really have any glaring injuries. Also, he has great genetics. If he doesn't push crazy heavy weights, which is probably why he has longevity. The problem is that if most people followed his routines, they probably wouldn't be as big as him because they don't have his genetics. So it depends what your goals are. If your goals are to be a top-level bodybuilder, you're willing to put your body on the line, you're willing to accept whatever ramifications come with it, and it is what it is. Ask Ronnie Coleman if he regretted having to have 8 back operations. His only regret is that he didn't lift more weight, he said, So that's what we do, When you love what you do and you're passionate, you put your body on the line and you have to take the ramifications for what you subjected yourself to. If that's not acceptable and it's not enough of a passion for you, then back off a little bit and preserve your body, because you will be sore and you will have injuries later in life, and they you have to be willing to be able to live with that. If it's not enough, if it doesn't mean enough for you to want to indulge your body and hurt your body, then don't do it. You know, it's really a personal decision.
Let's go to Carl's part. GH timing with insulin, does it matter, and what is the optimal way to use both if you had 5 IU of pharma a day at disposal? So much growth science web, it would be nice to get your teeth.
All right, let's go over this for the 9,000th time. When you inject growth hormone into your body, okay, you're not worried about your body producing its own. You're actually taking GH, okay? So it really doesn't matter when you put it in your body. I like to do it in the morning because that's when your body's the most catabolic. It's in the greatest state of breakdown. So it's a good idea to put some anabolic hormone in there. Now, what is insulin used for? Well, when you take growth hormone, it makes you insulin resistant, meaning your insulin that you're producing doesn't work as well. And while insulin itself is not a muscle building hormone, we need insulin to push the carbohydrates and the amino acids kind of piggyback on the carbohydrates into the muscle cells. If we don't get all our nutrition into our cells, we're not going to ultimately build muscle at an optimal rate. So when you take the insulin is important, but not that important. So what I like to do is, you know, supplementing with insulin, we usually supplement with a relatively fast-acting insulin. Humalog or Novolog would be your fastest acting insulins, and then you have your Humulin R, which is kind of close to that, but not quite. You get 2 release peaks. It peaks once, and then it peaks again in 2.5 hours. So I like to use that usually in the morning because it will cover the first 5 hours of the day, and then when you hit the 5-hour mark, you take a second shot, and that'll last another 5 hours, and that's about 11 hours a day, and that's how long you're pretty much up. You don't want to take insulin right before bed. So that seems to be a nice way to supplement. Now, you could take your first insulin shot and your first GH shot at the same time. It doesn't matter because they're not going to counteract each other at all. The GH will still do its thing, and the insulin will still push, you know, food into your muscle cells. So that usually is the first shot of the day, and then the second insulin shot is usually about 5 to 6 hours after the first one, whenever that might fall. I wouldn't do it pre-workout, that's for sure, because it's going to lower your blood sugar, but any time other than that would be adequate. So that's how I line up my growth hormone and my insulin shots when I was competing and trying to maximize muscle gains.
We're going to take a couple more. A quick hitter from Brad McCaff. Do you count fibrous carbs as calories?
No, because it's unabsorbable. Carbohydrates fiber is a carbohydrate that is unabsorbable. If you cannot absorb the fiber, okay, meaning your body cannot absorb it, it's just going to be eliminated from your body, then you can't absorb the calories from the fiber. Think about it. My product Fiberlize that I sell from Species Nutrition, it has I think it has 9.5 grams of carbs, you know, all from fiber, so it's 0 net carbs. None of them are absorbed, but there is calories in there. There's 4 calories per gram on the fiber. The problem is those calories are not absorbable, but they still are contained within the fiber. So as long as the fiber goes through you completely and you don't absorb it, then you don't count them, which you don't. But fiber is a carbohydrate, so it's just an unabsorbable carbohydrate. Now, if you take in a nutritional product that has, say, 25 grams of carbs, and 20 of those are fiber, then there is only what we call 5 net carbs. That means 5 grams of those 25 grams are the only carbs that you're going to be absorbing. So that's what you would figure your calories on, and that's what you would figure, you know, your I guess you could say glycemic impact on. Meaning those are the only carbs that your body's going to release insulin for. The other ones are going to go right through you and get eliminated.
We're going to take one more from Shapeless Recreation. Which combination of sugars and fats causes fat gain, and what difference does it make to the body is in a depleted state? John Meadows mentioned he likes to combine isolate, a fast-acting carb source, and about 10 grams of healthy fats from oil or peanut butter to slow down digestion for a pre-workout shake. But why does the insulin response in combination with fat, does it make someone store fat?
No, you know, I've about 20 years ago, I wrote on one of the original message boards on, I think it was mesomorphosis.com, that you shouldn't combine glucose or carbs with fats, okay, because you'll store that fat. And I just didn't understand at that time how insulin worked, really. So, you know, look, I learned along the way too. So I retracted that statement very, very early on in my career. And I said it doesn't matter because insulin only stores glucose or carbs as fat. Doesn't store fat as fat. So what I do, and I think John Meadows and I are in the same agreement, I like pre-workout to have a little fat in the meal because sometimes if you take like a real fast-acting protein like a whey isolate and you mix it with like a high molecular weight carbohydrate like my, let's say Isolyze and Carbolize, for instance, from my species nutrition line. If you just do that right before you go to the gym, sometimes you get such a crazy insulin spike that you actually get low blood sugar while you're training. So by putting a little bit of fat in there, I like to use personally like a tablespoon of macadamia oil. It kind of slows the transit because fats, when they hit the intestinal tract, your body has to release bile, okay, from the gallbladder. When bile from the gallbladder is released, it's a signal to the brain, slow down the intestinal tract. So now everything starts moving slower. When the intestinal tract moves slower, you absorb your food slower. So fats slow the transit of food through the intestinal tract, enabling them to be absorbed more efficiently at a slower rate. Okay? What that does is it will enable you to have more nutrition available while you're training and your blood sugars will be a little more stable. And that's my whole take. In the off season, I like to do that type of a shake, Isolyze, Carbolize, mac oil. And if I was in a dieting scenario, I wouldn't even worry about it. I would just eat whatever the next meal is. So there's a different strategy for off-season and pre-contest.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask Dave, brought to you by Beast Nutrition. Again, available now on beastnutrition.com. Testalize after the long wait, as well as the brand new product Amino Evolve to get 25% off using Amino 25. For Dave Plum and our producer Tyler Shore, doing an excellent job as always. I'm Steve Barucki. We'll see you next time.